My name is Sarah, and I thought I was buying safety when I moved to Pine Valley Estates. After my divorce, all I wanted was a fresh start for Emma and me. A place where she could ride her bike without fear, where neighbors looked out for each other, where childhood could bloom without the shadows of urban danger. The neighborhood looked like something from a magazine. Every lawn perfectly manicured, every mailbox identical, every house painted in approved colors that created a symphony of suburban harmony. The Homeowners Association handbook was thick as a phone book, but I figured that meant they took care of things properly. Karen Morrison knocked on my door 3 days after we moved in. She carried a plate of chocolate chip cookies and wore a smile that seemed painted on her face. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, and her clothes looked like they came straight from a country club catalog. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, extending the plate. "I am Karen Morrison, and I serve on the HOA board. We are so excited to have new blood in Pine Valley Estates." Emma peeked out from behind me, still shy in our new home. Karen's smile widened when she saw my daughter. "And you must be Emma. What a beautiful little girl. I am sure you will love playing in our community playground. We have very strict rules to keep all the children safe." I should have heard the warning in those words. Instead, I heard protection. Karen stepped inside without being invited, her eyes scanning our boxes and furniture with the precision of an appraiser. She made mental notes about everything, though I did not understand why at the time. "The previous owners were challenging," Karen said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They never quite understood how important it is to maintain standards, but I can tell you and Emma will fit in perfectly." Over the next few weeks, Karen became a constant presence. She would appear whenever Emma played in our backyard, always with helpful suggestions about noise levels or appropriate play activities. She recommended contractors for our landscaping, painters for our fence, and shops for our home decor. "The HOA handbook is very specific about lawn height," she said one morning, pointing at our grass with a measuring stick. "Yours is getting close to the maximum allowable length. I would hate to see you get your first violation notice." Emma loved drawing with sidewalk chalk on our driveway. She would spend hours creating elaborate pictures of flowers, rainbows, and stick figure families. The colorful art made me smile every time I came home from work. Karen did not smile. "Chalk can stain concrete," she told me one afternoon, watching Emma add purple flowers to her masterpiece. "And some of the neighbors have mentioned that the bright colors are distracting from the neighborhood's aesthetic." "She is just being a kid," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Of course," Karen replied, but her smile never reached her eyes. "I am sure you understand how important it is to teach children about community standards early." Emma's laughter echoed across our backyard as she played on her swing set. The sound filled me with joy, but I noticed Karen's face tighten every time my daughter's giggles carried beyond our fence line. "Children can be so energetic," Karen said during one of her unannounced visits. "Some of the residents work from home and need quiet during the day. Perhaps Emma could play more quietly." The requests kept coming. Could Emma's toys be stored out of sight when not in use? Could we consider a different color for our front door? Could we trim the tree that was casting shadows on Karen's prized roses? Each suggestion came wrapped in concern for the neighborhood's well-being, but I began to feel like we were being studied, cataloged, and found wanting. Karen's visits became inspections. Her smiles became assessments. I told myself I was being paranoid. Karen was just thorough, dedicated to maintaining the beautiful community we had moved into. But Emma started asking questions that made my stomach turn. "Mommy, why does the nice lady always watch me when I play? Why does she count when I laugh? Why does she take pictures of our house?" The chocolate chip cookies had been delicious, but they came with a price I was only beginning to understand. Karen Morrison was not just a neighbor or an HOA board member. She was a predator, and we had walked directly into her carefully constructed trap. The first violation notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between my electric bill and a grocery store flyer. The official HOA letterhead made it look important, but the offense was ridiculous. Trash receptacle placement violation. Containers must be removed from street view within 4 hours of collection completion. The fine was $50. I had been 12 minutes late bringing in my garbage cans. I called Karen, thinking there had been a mistake. Her voice was honey-sweet when she answered. "Oh, Sarah, I am so sorry about that notice. The rules are the rules, though. We have to be fair to everyone. But do not worry, I am sure this was just a one-time oversight." The second notice came the following week. Grass height violation, $75. The third notice was for Emma's sidewalk chalk, classified as unauthorized ground markings, $100. By the end of the month, I had received 6 violation notices totaling $450. Each one was technically correct according to the HOA handbook, but the enforcement was surgical in its precision. Other houses had grass just as tall, trash cans just as visible, yet only my mailbox filled with penalty notices. I started watching the neighborhood more carefully. Karen Morrison walked the streets like a general inspecting troops, clipboard in hand, camera around her neck. She photographed everything, but somehow only our violations made it into official reports. The Hendersons had paint peeling on their shutters. No violation. The Johnsons left their Christmas lights up until March. No violation. But when Emma left a single toy truck on our front porch overnight, I received a $100 fine for unsightly personal property display. Karen was recruiting allies in her campaign. Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down started reporting on our activities. Mr. Chen began taking photos of our yard from his bedroom window. The retired couple across the street made detailed notes about Emma's outdoor play schedule. I discovered this network of spies during a confrontation at the community mailboxes. Karen was distributing flyers to a small group of neighbors, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Some residents are not taking their community responsibilities seriously," she said, not bothering to lower her voice when she saw me approaching. "We need to maintain vigilance to protect our property values." Mrs. Patterson nodded enthusiastically. "That little girl makes so much noise. My husband cannot concentrate on his crossword puzzles." "And the mother parks her car 3 inches over the driveway line," added Mr. Chen. "It creates an unsightly appearance." They were talking about Emma and me like we were a disease that needed to be cured. The financial pressure was crushing me. Between the constant fines and the legal fees I was paying to fight them, my savings account was bleeding money. I took on extra shifts at work, but every dollar I earned seemed to flow directly into Karen's war chest. The playground became Emma's Waterloo. Karen launched a campaign to have children restricted from using the equipment during quiet hours, which somehow expanded to cover most of the day. She claimed Emma was too rough, too loud, too disruptive for the other children. "Your daughter pushed Tommy Henderson off the slide," Karen told me during an ambush conversation at the grocery store. "Emma said Tommy was bullying a smaller child and she told him to stop. She never touched him." Tommy's mother saw the whole thing. Your daughter has anger management issues. The lies were becoming more elaborate, more damaging. Karen was not just trying to bankrupt us anymore. She was trying to destroy Emma's reputation and my credibility as a mother. Other parents began avoiding us at school pickup. Children stopped inviting Emma to birthday parties. The isolation was systematic and devastating. I realized with growing horror that Karen Morrison was not just enforcing HOA rules. She was conducting a methodical campaign to drive us out of Pine Valley estates entirely. Every violation notice, every fine, every whispered conversation was part of a larger strategy designed to make our lives unbearable. The beautiful neighborhood I had chosen for Emma's safety had become our prison, and Karen Morrison held all the keys. The bicycle incident happened on a Thursday afternoon in May. Emma had been riding her pink bike in lazy circles on our driveway, staying well within our property lines. I was watching from the kitchen window, grateful to see her smiling again after weeks of growing anxiety about the mean lady who seemed to hate her for existing. Karen appeared at the edge of our driveway like a storm cloud rolling across a clear sky. She marched directly toward Emma, her face twisted with rage that seemed completely out of proportion to anything an 8-year-old could have done. "You little brat," Karen screamed, her voice carrying across the entire neighborhood. "You rode that bike too close to my roses again." Emma stopped pedaling and looked confused. She had not been anywhere near Karen's property. She had been riding in our own driveway, at least 20 feet from the property line. "I did not go near your flowers," Emma said, her voice small and frightened. "Do not lie to me," Karen snarled, grabbing the handlebars of Emma's bike. "I saw you. You are trying to damage my garden." I dropped my coffee cup and ran outside, but Karen moved faster than I expected. She yanked the bike sideways, sending Emma tumbling to the concrete. My daughter's knees scraped against the rough driveway, tearing skin and drawing blood. Emma began to cry, more from shock than pain, but the sound of her tears ignited something primal in my chest. "Get away from my daughter," I shouted, rushing to Emma's side. Karen stood over both of us, still gripping the bike like a weapon. Her face was flushed with an anger that seemed to come from some deep, poisonous well inside her soul. "Your daughter is out of control," she said, her voice cold and calculated despite the fury in her eyes. "Someone needs to teach her respect for other people's property." "She was not on your property. She was riding her bike in our own driveway. She was planning to damage my roses." I could see the intent in her eyes. The accusation was so insane that I struggled to respond. Karen was claiming she could read malicious intent in the eyes of an 8-year-old child who had been doing nothing more threatening than riding a bicycle in circles. I helped Emma to her feet, checking her scraped knees and wiping away her tears. The injuries were minor, but the emotional damage was written across my daughter's face. She looked at Karen with a mixture of fear and confusion that broke my heart. "You put your hands on my child," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "If you ever touch her again, I will have you arrested." Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Go ahead and call the police. My brother-in-law is a sergeant. My cousin works in Child Protective Services. Do you really think they will take your word over mine?" The threat hit me like a physical blow. Karen was not just claiming she could avoid consequences. She was threatening to weaponize the system against us, to turn the very institutions meant to protect children into tools of persecution. "Maybe Emma needs to be removed from this environment," Karen continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than her shouting. "A mother who cannot control her child, who lets her run wild and damage other people's property. Child Services deals with situations like this all the time. Emma pressed closer to me, her small body trembling. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the threat in Karen's tone. Over the following days, Karen's campaign against us intensified beyond anything I had experienced. She began spreading stories throughout the neighborhood that painted Emma as a dangerous, uncontrolled child and me as a negligent mother. The lies grew more elaborate with each telling. Emma had supposedly thrown rocks at Karen's windows. She had allegedly killed flowers by pouring soda on them. She had apparently scared other children with violent threats during playground encounters that had never happened. Other parents started crossing the street when they saw us coming. Children were forbidden from playing with Emma. The few neighbors who had remained neutral began viewing us with suspicion and fear. Emma's behavior changed dramatically. She stopped playing outside unless I forced her to. She flinched whenever she heard voices in the neighborhood. She began having nightmares about the mean lady who wanted to take her away from me. I consulted lawyers, filed complaints with the police, and appealed to the HOA board for relief. Every door I knocked on led nowhere. Karen's connections and reputation protected her from consequences, while our lives crumbled under her systematic assault. The breaking point was not a single moment, but a gradual realization that we were completely alone. The systems I had trusted to protect us had been corrupted or neutralized. Karen Morrison had declared war on my family, and all the rules of civilized society had been suspended. Something had to give, and I was terrified it would be Emma's spirit that broke first. Tuesday, June 15th was supposed to be a perfect day. School had ended for the summer, and Emma was finally starting to smile again. She had spent the morning in our backyard, creating an elaborate chalk masterpiece on the concrete patio. Flowers bloomed in purple and pink. A rainbow arched over a stick figure family holding hands. The word love spelled out in careful block letters. I was making lunch when I heard Emma giggling outside. The sound filled me with relief. Despite everything Karen had put us through, my daughter was still capable of joy. She was resilient in the way that only children can be, finding happiness in simple things like colored chalk and sunshine. The screaming started without warning. "Get away from my property line," Karen's voice cut through the afternoon air like a knife. "You are destroying the neighborhood." I looked out the kitchen window and felt my blood freeze. Karen Morrison was standing in our backyard, having climbed over our fence without permission. She held a gardening trowel in her right hand, the metal blade glinting in the sunlight. Emma stood frozen next to her chalk artwork, confusion and fear written across her small face. She had been drawing at least 15 feet from any property line, well within our own yard. I ran outside, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Get off my property," I shouted. "You have no right to be here." Karen spun toward me, her eyes wild with an anger that seemed to consume her entire being. Her carefully maintained appearance had cracked completely. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, her face flushed with rage. "Your brat is ruining everything," she screamed. "Look at this mess. Look at these disgusting colors all over the concrete. The whole neighborhood can see this eyesore from their windows. She is drawing with chalk in our own backyard. It will wash off with the first rain. It is lowering property values. It is attracting the wrong kind of families to our community. Your daughter is a menace who needs to be stopped." Karen raised the gardening trowel, pointing it at Emma like an accusation. My daughter took a step backward, her eyes wide with terror. "She is 8 years old," I said, moving between Karen and Emma. She is just being a kid. She is being a problem, Karen snarled. Every day she makes noise, leaves toys around, draws these hideous pictures. She does not belong here. Neither do you. Karen began destroying Emma's artwork, scraping the trowel across the concrete with violent strokes. Purple flowers disappeared under metal. The rainbow dissolved into gray smears. The word love became unreadable scratches. Emma started to cry, watching hours of careful work vanish in seconds. "Stop it," she said through her tears. "You are ruining my picture." "Good," Karen replied, grinding the trowel against the concrete with increasing fury. "Maybe now you will learn to stop making messes." I stepped forward to physically remove Karen from our property, but she whirled around faster than I expected. The trowel was no longer pointed at the ground. It was aimed directly at Emma. "This ends now," Karen said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than her screaming. "Your daughter has pushed me too far. She has forced me to take action." What happened next unfolded in slow motion, each second stretching into an eternity of horror. Karen lunged toward Emma with the gardening trowel raised above her head. My 8-year-old daughter tried to run, but her foot slipped on the chalk dust scattered across the concrete. She fell backward, landing hard on the patio. The metal blade came down like a lightning strike. The trowel pierced Emma's shoulder just below her collarbone, the sharp edge sliding through her favorite yellow dress and into her flesh. Blood bloomed across the bright fabric like a terrible flower. Emma's scream shattered the afternoon silence. It was not the cry of a child who had scraped her knee or bumped her head. It was the scream of someone experiencing real, adult-sized pain for the first time in her young life. I heard my own voice join hers, a sound that came from some primitive part of my brain that existed before language, before civilization, before anything except the need to protect my child from predators. Karen stood over Emma's bleeding form, still holding the weapon she had just used to stab my daughter. Blood dripped from the trowel onto the ruined chalk artwork. "She made me do it," Karen said, her voice eerily calm despite the chaos around us. "Your daughter forced me to take extreme measures. She would not listen to reason." Emma writhed on the concrete, her small hands pressed against the wound in her shoulder. Blood seeped between her fingers, staining her yellow dress a deep crimson. I dropped to my knees beside her, pulling off my shirt to press against the wound. Emma's blood soaked through the fabric immediately, warm and sticky against my hands. "Call 911, I screamed at Karen, but she just stood there watching my daughter bleed. "This is what happens when children do not follow the rules," Karen said, as if she was delivering a lesson rather than standing over a stabbed child. "Maybe now she will learn to respect other people's property." I fumbled for my phone with blood-slicked fingers, calling for an ambulance while holding pressure on Emma's wound. My daughter's eyes were wide with shock and pain, looking up at me with complete trust that I would somehow make this horror stop. Karen Morrison had crossed every line that separated civilization from chaos. She had stabbed my child over sidewalk chalk and property values. And in that moment, looking down at Emma's blood on my hands, I made a decision that would change everything. The system had failed us completely. Legal remedies were meaningless. Civilized solutions were inadequate. Some crimes could only be answered with a mother's justice. The ambulance ride felt like falling through a nightmare. Emma lay strapped to the gurney, her small body looking impossibly fragile under the bright medical lights. The paramedic worked over her shoulder wound while I held her free hand, trying to project calm while my world crumbled around us. "Is my mommy going to be okay?" Emma whispered, her voice weak from pain and shock. The question broke something inside me. Even stabbed and bleeding, my 8-year-old daughter was worried about me instead of herself. "I am fine, baby," I lied. "The doctors are going to fix you up and everything will be okay." But nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. The emergency room became our purgatory. Doctors rushed Emma into surgery while I sat in the waiting room, her blood still under my fingernails, trying to answer questions from nurses and police officers who seemed more interested in procedures than justice. Detective Martinez looked tired when he finally arrived to take my statement. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes, but I could see the skepticism in his expression when I described what had happened. "So you are saying that Karen Morrison, a respected member of the community and HOA board member, stabbed your daughter over sidewalk chalk?" "That is exactly what I am saying. She climbed over our fence, destroyed Emma's artwork, and then stabbed her with a gardening trowel. And there were no other witnesses to this alleged attack." The word "alleged" hit me like a slap. Emma was in surgery getting stitches in her shoulder, and this detective was treating the stabbing like it might be fiction. "Check the security camera on the Miller's house," I said. "It faces our backyard." Detective Martinez made a note, but his expression remained doubtful. "We will look into it. In the meantime, I should let you know that Mrs. Morrison has filed a complaint claiming that your daughter attacked her with a garden tool and she was defending herself." The lie was so outrageous that I struggled to form words. Emma is 8 years old. Karen is a full-grown adult. How could my daughter possibly attack anyone with a garden tool? "Mrs. Morrison claims your daughter took the trowel from her gardening supplies and threatened her with it. She says she was forced to disarm the child and accidentally caused injury during the struggle." Karen was not just avoiding responsibility. She was inverting the entire situation, transforming herself from attacker into victim. My stabbed child had somehow become the aggressor in her twisted narrative. "That is completely false," I said, but Detective Martinez was already closing his notebook. "We will investigate thoroughly," he said, but his tone suggested the investigation was already over. "Mrs. Morrison has an excellent reputation in the community. Multiple neighbors have vouched for her character." Of course they had. Karen's network of allies would rally to protect her, just as they had supported her campaign of harassment against my family. The surgery took 3 hours. When the doctor finally emerged, he looked exhausted. "Emma is going to be fine," he said. "The wound was deep but clean. No major arteries or nerves were damaged. She will have a scar, but she should recover completely." A scar. My daughter would carry a permanent reminder of Karen Morrison's violence for the rest of her life. Emma looked so small in the hospital bed, her shoulder wrapped in white bandages that made the attack seem both more real and more impossible. She had always been my brave little girl, but now fear lived in her eyes. "I do not want to go home," she whispered when she thought I was not listening. "What if the mean lady comes back?" That night, sitting beside Emma's hospital bed while she slept, I made my decision. The police would not protect us. Karen's connections and reputation made her untouchable through legal channels. The system that was supposed to serve justice had been corrupted by influence and politics. But there was another kind of justice, older, simpler, more direct. Karen Morrison had stabbed my child. She would face consequences for that action, even if those consequences had to be delivered by my own hands. I began planning while Emma slept, her small chest rising and falling under hospital blankets. The rage that had been building for months crystallized into cold, focused purpose. Karen thought her connections made her untouchable. She thought her reputation provided immunity from retribution. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Some crimes demanded more than legal remedies. Some acts of evil could only be answered with equal force. Karen Morrison had declared war on my family. She had drawn first blood. Now it was my turn. 3 weeks later, I stood outside Karen Morrison's house at 9:30 in the evening. Her husband was away on a business trip, and her teenage children were spending the summer with relatives. The house was dark except for the kitchen light, where Karen followed the same routine every night. Herbal tea, organic crackers, and 30 minutes of reviewing HOA complaints before bed. I had been watching her patterns for weeks, learning her schedule with the same methodical precision she had used to destroy my family. The back door was always unlocked during her evening routine. She felt safe in her perfect neighborhood, protected by her reputation and connections. Tonight, that safety was an illusion. I entered through the sliding glass door that led to her kitchen. Karen sat at her granite island, reading violation notices and sipping chamomile tea. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally fear. "What are you doing in my house?" she asked, her voice trying to project authority despite the terror in her eyes. "I came to collect what you owe me," I said, closing the door behind me. Karen reached for her phone, but I was faster. I knocked it off the counter, sending it sliding across the kitchen floor. "You stabbed my daughter," I continued, my voice calm and steady. "Now we are going to discuss the consequences." "Your daughter attacked me," Karen said, falling back on the lie she had told the police. "I was defending myself. Emma is 8 years old. She was drawing with chalk in our own backyard when you climbed over our fence and stabbed her with a gardening trowel. She was destroying property values. Someone had to take action." The casual way she said it, as if stabbing a child over sidewalk chalk was a reasonable response, confirmed everything I had come to understand about Karen Morrison. She was not just cruel or controlling. She was fundamentally broken, lacking the basic human capacity for empathy that prevented normal people from hurting children. "You have been terrorizing my family for months," I said, stepping closer to where she sat. "Fines, violations, harassment, lies. You turned our neighbors against us. You tried to destroy Emma's reputation and my credibility as a mother." "I was maintaining community standards," Karen replied, but her voice was shaking now. "People like you do not understand what it takes to preserve property values. People like me. Single mothers with undisciplined children. You bring chaos into ordered communities. You lower the quality of life for everyone else." There it was, the truth beneath all the HOA paperwork and violation notices. Karen Morrison was not protecting property values or community standards. She was enforcing her vision of who deserved to exist in her perfect world. "Your connections will not save you tonight," I said. "Your reputation means nothing here. It is just you and me, and the debt you owe for what you did to Emma." Karen tried to run, but I caught her before she reached the kitchen doorway. She was smaller than me, softer from years of suburban comfort. Her carefully maintained nails broke against my arms as she clawed at me desperately. "You cannot do this," she gasped. "I know people, I have connections, they will find you. The same connections that protected you when you stabbed my daughter. The same people who covered for you when you terrorized my family." I forced Karen back against the kitchen island, pinning her there with my weight. Her herbal tea spilled across the granite surface, mixing with the violation notices she had been reviewing. "This is for Emma," I said, and brought my knee up into Karen's ribs. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Karen screamed, a sound of pure agony that reminded me exactly of how Emma had sounded when the trowel pierced her shoulder. "That is one," I said, adjusting my grip on Karen's arms. "Let me explain how this is going to work. You broke my daughter's heart with your harassment. You broke her sense of safety with your threats. You broke her skin with your weapon. Now I am going to break you piece by piece until we are even." Karen tried to speak, but only managed gasping sobs. The perfectly composed HOA board member had dissolved into a terrified, broken woman who finally understood what it felt like to be helpless. The second rib cracked under my elbow. Karen's scream was weaker this time, her voice already damaged from the first fracture. "That is two," I said. "How many more before you understand what you put Emma through?" "Please," Karen whispered, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. "I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt her so badly." "You are not sorry you hurt her. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry there are consequences." The third rib broke with a wet, grinding sound. Karen's body went limp, held up only by my grip on her arms. "Three," I counted. "Do you remember what you said when you stabbed my daughter? You said she made you do it. You said she forced you to take extreme measures." Karen could not respond anymore. She hung in my arms like a broken doll, her perfect suburban mask finally stripped away to reveal the monster underneath. I broke two more ribs before I was satisfied. 5 fractures for 5 months of terror. 5 breaks for $500 in fraudulent fines. 5 cracks to match the 5 words Emma had whispered in the hospital. "I do not want to go home." When I finally released her, Karen collapsed onto her kitchen floor. She was still breathing, still conscious, but completely broken. Her ribs would heal eventually, but she would never forget the lesson I had taught her. "This is what happens when you hurt children," I said, standing over her crumpled form. "Remember that the next time you think about terrorizing a family." I left Karen bleeding on her kitchen tiles, surrounded by the violation notices that had been her weapons of choice. Her perfect kitchen was now as broken and violated as she had made my family feel. Justice had been served, one rib at a time. I drove home through the quiet streets of Pine Valley Estates, my hand steady on the steering wheel despite what I had just done. The neighborhood looked different now, less threatening, as if breaking Karen Morrison had somehow broken the spell she had cast over our lives. Emma was sleeping peacefully when I checked on her. She had been having nightmares for weeks, but tonight her face was relaxed, free from the fear that had haunted her since the stabbing. Somehow, she knew the danger was over. The news about Karen's accident spread through the neighborhood quickly. She had apparently fallen down her kitchen stairs, breaking several ribs and suffering internal injuries. The story was thin, but no one questioned it too closely. Karen had made enemies during her reign as HOA enforcer, and few people felt motivated to investigate too deeply. Karen Morrison disappeared from neighborhood life entirely. No more morning patrols with her clipboard and camera. No more violation notices arriving in mailboxes. No more intimidation campaigns against families who failed to meet her impossible standards. The HOA board replaced her quietly, installing a retired teacher who believed in gentle reminders rather than financial warfare. The new leadership dissolved most of Karen's punitive fines and relaxed enforcement of the most ridiculous regulations. Children began playing in the streets again. Toys appeared on front porches without triggering violation notices. Laughter returned to the playground during hours that had previously been designated as quiet time. Emma healed faster than I expected. The physical wound left a small scar on her shoulder, but the emotional damage faded as she realized the mean lady was never coming back. She started drawing with sidewalk chalk again, creating more elaborate artworks than ever before. "Mommy," she said one afternoon while working on a particularly ambitious rainbow, "I had a dream that the mean lady was gone forever." "What happened to her in your dream?" I asked. "She just disappeared, like she was never real at all." In many ways, Emma was right. The Karen Morrison who had terrorized our neighborhood, who had stabbed a child over property values, who had weaponized suburban politics against innocent families, had indeed disappeared. What remained was a broken woman hiding in her house, afraid to leave her own property. I felt no regret for what I had done. Karen had received exactly the justice she deserved, measured in broken bones that would heal with time. Emma's trauma, by contrast, could have lasted a lifetime if I had not acted to end the threat. Other families in Pine Valley estates began to relax as Karen's absence became permanent. Parents stopped watching their children with nervous eyes. Homeowners stopped checking their mailboxes with dread. The neighborhood transformed from a place of fear into the safe haven I had originally sought for Emma. Sometimes justice requires abandoning the rules of civilized society to enforce its most fundamental principles. Sometimes protecting the innocent demands accepting moral complexity that courts and law enforcement cannot address. I had become something I never expected to be, a mother who chose violence to protect her child. But looking at Emma's peaceful face as she slept, knowing she would never again fear the woman who had tried to destroy her childhood, I knew I had made the right choice. Some crimes can only be answered with a mother's justice. And sometimes, that justice is exactly what the world needs.